When I was thinking about what to say this evening, I came across a piece that Jim wrote, I think fairly recently, called The Same 30 Things. It was published in a local publication, String Notes, a few years ago. Despite the fact that it's called The Same 30 Things, it has 31 things listed, because you can't contain Jim Hainlen in just 30 things. A lot of the suggestions, which are sort of nominally aimed at music teachers, work for other contexts. So I want to go through a few. Number 15 on the list echoes what I said about really listening. Great listening, he said, is great playing. Deliberately focus your mind on the moment. Do not pick up your instrument and zone out. You've already heard about Jim reading poetry to us. Number 16, part of it. Don't lose your imaginations to standardized tests, correct answers, and admonitions to grow up. That, and I've struggled to think about how to say this, but I think it was a really important way for me to see the importance of a liberal arts education, little L liberal arts education. And it's also, I think, a big part of why a lot of the people who are coming up here talking and who are donating and the people who are here are not people who are musicians. I still occasionally pick up my violin. I tried to do a little improv. My son was a music major, and I tried to do a little improv with him. It was a little rough. He's good. I'm not. But I think that's a big part of why so many people who did not end up in music are still so devoted to this part of their lives. Jim made us pay attention to each other, to listen to each other, to look at each other, to know what we owed to each other as musicians and friends and classmates. Number 30 on the list. Watching each other is how we create music together. Enjoy raising your eyes up from the music and seeing the horizon of the room or stage. And then his last piece of advice, number 31. Music matters. This is what you are doing with your life at this moment. Make the most of it each time you pick up your instrument. Matt Tucson, who we heard from earlier, incredibly important part of keeping this legacy fund going and for this event tonight, talked about how Jim would always find resources to bring in the jazz violinist, Brandy Sabine, to teach us improvisation, to create an interdisciplinary conference connecting music to neuroscience, and so on. And the legacy fund that, again, if you haven't donated already, even if you have, we're going to ask you to donate. It's part of making it so those resources can be found for generations to come, especially at a time when resources for the arts are being stretched and cut at every turn. Jim also knew, without necessarily saying it out loud, what students needed to be the best version of themselves and to be safe in their situations. Just one example, he insisted on keeping the orchestra open during pep rallies. I understand some people were not happy about that, and part of that was to make it so there was a safe place for queer kids and others for whom those events might not be great or safe experiences. I am so grateful for all of that. Looking back, because I realized of how much I think about my time teaching, my time mentoring, my time leading teams, goes back to him, and I bet that's the case for many of you today. I think that's why so many of you are here today. But I am also very specifically grateful for him insisting that we were going to do hard things and not cut corners. As I said, I only occasionally play violin these days, but that lesson has been incredibly important with how I've tried to live my life in all sorts of ways unrelated to music, and I suspect how you have lived your lives. It is also not unrelated to why our son ends up playing doom metal on a bass clarinet. That's another story, but you can ask me about it sometime. One of my favorite musicians right now is a British fellow named Greg Turner, and at every show when he's talking about how he wants fans to treat each other with kindness at the show, he has a lot of tips. If you fall down, you pick somebody up, right? That might be familiar to some of you. But when he's talking about it, he says the phrase, "We are a community if we choose to be a community." And I don't think that's his phrase necessarily, but it sticks with me. And every day of his career, and I think every day of his life, Jim has chosen to make community better. It's my honor to introduce to you my friend, my teacher, and my inspiration, Jim Hainlen.
Okay, this is wonderful, unexpected, wonderful, and should tell me your name when you come up close, because I might have changed, but you've changed more since you were 17. Wow. Okay. I want to begin by thanking everybody on the committee and all of you people for showing up. It really is an amazing honor. I was saying to Dr. Wedgren, I think the school system should do this for more teachers. Honor the teachers, honor the legacy of people who've gone before, and stay in touch with what has happened to make this school system very special. I've been putting up some programs and lists of what students have been accomplishing, and somebody wrote me from Missouri and said, "Are you telling me all of these kids went to public school in Stillwater?" And I said, "Yes, I am." She said, "That's amazing. That's just really amazing." So that's what you people are known for. Okay, I have to have some notes too. I haven't done this for a while. I'm not shaking, but I am nervous. Recently, I saw a mother from about 25, 30 years ago. She recognized me, but as soon as she said her name, I knew who she was, who her students were. And she said, "I'm coming to your memorial service next week." And I said, "No, let's clarify that. It's not my memorial service. I'm still living." And in fact, if you've been in touch with anybody who is in touch with me, you know that at the end of August, Mayo, as they put it, says we couldn't find no detectable cancer. They never say you could. It was stage 4 cancer 3 years ago this month, and they gave me 3 to 5 months to live. So being here tonight is just a most wonderful thing. A little poetry, how could we not? Theodore said in his poem, North American Sequence, from the Far Field, which is a marvelous book of poetry, the rose exceeds us all. And that's my view of everybody in this room, all my students, that you exceeded me. And that's what I wanted. In fact, I used to say once in a while, you should not be in the first violin section unless you could play violin much better than I could play. But the task we have to do in music and in life is to locate ourselves where we live, within the music, within what we do in our lives. So in music, it's fairly simple in a way. We're playing a Tchaikovsky symphony, and I'm playing third horn, I'm playing second violin. And if you're not a violinist, we arrange it this way. Third stand, second violin, outside player. It's all preset, right? But then it gets more complicated. And it gets more complicated because then we have to locate ourselves within the melody, the harmony, and the rhythm. And after that, it's even more complex because we must locate ourselves within the relationships of the music. How does my part blend with the symphony? Who stands out here? Who stands out there? Who do I need to listen to at this moment? And which line is the most important? And I should not cover that. In fact, I used to tell the orchestras over the stage at Symphony Hall in Boston, it says, know who has the melody. It's the last thing they look at before going on stage. Know who has the melody. Finally comes the last layer of our contribution, and that's meaning and emotion. If it was just the notes that were there, it wouldn't mean very much. But it's what we bring to the notes, because those little ink dots on the page can't carry what's in the human heart. This can't do it. But we have to work for that. It's not free. And that's where empathy for others and a sense of humanity of everybody we come in contact with, within the orchestra room, within our communities, that's where all that comes into play. I never really cared if we achieved the moment of excellence, whether it was a concert or whether it was a rehearsal. When you think about concerts of high school kids trying to get all those people on that stage to peak at one moment in a concert, pretty tough thing to do. But we could do it in rehearsal, and we all know that we peaked. That's all we needed, is that we peaked at some point in the preparation of that music. And what I asked for was, not all that much. That every single person in that room was focused on that moment. Not worrying about what was happening around us, but focused on that moment when they breathed into their horns, when they played timpani, when they played their violins. And when you think about it, that's when suddenly the orchestra would become kind of weightless. We just sort of seemed like we lifted up. Didn't last very long. You can't ask high school kids to stretch that out very long. And I used to say, if I get one perfectly balanced, in tune chord a year, I'm happy. And I meant it. I absolutely meant it. We had that one beautiful, shining moment. We could all deal with the others. And again, we had very often 14 to 16 first violins, 14 to 16 second violins, 10 to 12 violas, 8 to 10 cellists, 4 bass players, 4 flutes, 2 oboes, 4 clarinets, 2 bassoons, 4 French horns, 3 trumpets, 3 trombones, 1 tuba, 1 timpani, 2 percussion, and in the end, very often, 1 harp. That's a lot of kids to bring together and highlight that moment. And now you can see why that's pretty difficult stuff to do in an hour a day in a public school setting. Because it was Berlioz' Hungarian March, Smetana, the Bartered Bride. Bill, where are you? Didn't we do that? Yeah. The Hungarian March was earlier than that, because I had to teach all those French horns how to transpose. Schumann's Spring Symphony, Copland Hoedown, we did that several times. Finlandia, Beethoven Symphonies 1, 5, 7, Rimsky-Korsakov, Capriccio Espagnol, Brahms Fourth Symphony, and the last 10 years, Elgar Nimrod Variation. And of course, I'll always remember Marlena and Liz. Little did I know they had a box of Kleenex under their chair. And we started playing that, and they started passing it back through the section. And we needed it, me included. These compositions might not mean all that much to everybody in this room. You're not as much a classical nerd as I am. But I can assure you, the kids who played those pieces of music can see the color of the whiteness on that page. They can see the font of the music. They could see the line on page 2 they couldn't play and never could play, so I told them just to fake it. They could see the tough bowings. If you're not a string player, you don't realize how complex bowings are. You can teach figurine in 10 years. It takes a lifetime to learn good bowings. A lifetime to learn them. So 29 years later, the students can still feel the rosin bow pulling the string sideways. They could feel the bass drum imprints. And they could sit and wonder that a classmate of theirs could reach such levels of achievement on a solo that everybody simply sat there stunned. It was amazing. All the kids saw the solos. In 1977, Dr. Weddergren, right here, went on a spring trip with us to San Francisco, and he paid his way. We're not a corrupt organization. Right? Didn't you? I don't know. The superintendent of the school system that we played for, and it wasn't San Francisco, it was some place just out of San Francisco, sat there, and I know Eric Carlson did the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto out there. I'm not sure what the rest of what was played, but that man popped out of his chair and came running up to Dr. Weddergren and said, "How do you do this in Minnesota? We have nothing like this in any school system in California. Nothing like this." And I think Dr. Weddergren's answer was incredible. He said, first of all, take a look at these students and the commitments they make for excellence. Then comes the parents who support them with lessons, instruments, driving to here and there, youth symphonies, all of that. And then comes the community that surrounds these kids and encourages them to strive for excellence. And that's what we have in this community, strive for excellence. I thought it was an amazing answer. I was just kind of standing there, sweating like whatever. And he came up with this wonderful answer for this man none of us knew, who was so enthusiastic about student musicians from all this distance away. Fast forward to now, I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer 3 years ago. Most of you probably know that, some of you might not. They told Linda and I that I had 3 to 5 months to live. Wasn't a really happy time in our lives. So I went home pretty discouraged, thinking, 3 months. And I went out and sat on the bench halfway up the Main Street steps and just looked at the town, looked at the river, and said, I'm not willing to give up. I'm just not willing to give up. And then I remembered later on, because I don't think I went to sleep that night, but I remembered later on in the night that Toby Kohler from the class of 93 played bassoon and played the second and third movements of the Beethoven Fifth Piano Concerto on the concerto concert, was a urologist at Mayo. First thing next morning, I called Toby, and he said, "Oh, you're in." I was kind of stunned. But that moment didn't start there. It started much earlier with Toby, because when he was earned one of the concerto spots for the Beethoven, he came in about a month before the concerto concert in the spring, and he said, I know you're not going to like this, but my family's decided to go to Florida. And I said, timing is bad, Toby, timing is bad, but if you do this, if you go down there and you can deliberately look for some metaphor that explains Beethoven to me, and if you plan every single day to rehearse that concerto in your mind, then bon appetit, go and have a good time. When he came back, he actually came kind of sprinting into the orchestra room, and he said, I found it. And of course I had forgotten what I said, but I said, the Holy Grail, what did you find? And he said, I was lying on the beach in the sunshine, and I opened my eyes, and there was a seagull over me. And the wings were arched into the wind, and it was just hovering right over my head. And he said, that's what I would like to play Beethoven like. And I said, okay, when you go out there, I want you to think of no notes, I just want you to think of playing that seagull. And he did, and it was an absolutely incredible performance. It was my first time conducting that Beethoven piano concerto, and it was sort of amazing. And we looked at each other during the performance, which I often did with the soloist, and you kind of nod at them. But just high school kids, for God's sakes, playing Beethoven piano concertos. And this is what I want us all to think about with this fund. That the wind is blowing each of us over the ocean, whether we lift up and fly or crashes kind of up to us, that motionless moment that the seagull can have. We've all left the shore, metaphorically, literally, and we've swum in waters that are too deep for us. And I had great fun conducting that concerto that night, because all I could think of was Toby lying there, and that seagull capturing everything about that moment. I wasn't going to tell you the next story, but when I was standing over here, I thought, you know what? I got the mic. You can't pull me out of that. Not everybody goes down to Rochester and gets invited to stay at their oncologist's house overnight in the basement bedroom and go out to lunch or supper with them, right? That's not everybody does that. But the first time I was down there, Toby and Lisa, are you here tonight, Lisa? She was gonna come. Okay. She's class of '93 also. I started her on violin at Withrow and noticed very early on that she loved poetry. So I went to her classroom teacher and I said, she's reading way above class level. Let her go out the hallway and write poetry. And the teacher did. And now she just got named a poetry editor for National Poetry Magazine last week. So my last story, somebody saw me earlier tonight. Oh, and by the way, Marlena was supposed to stand behind people and go like this when I had been with one person too long. But you can just walk up and give a hip check to them and send them on their way, because I would really like to say hi to people. In the final lullaby concert that we played at the old high school, I was standing in the back of the auditorium watching all of these wonderful high school kids in their pajamas, and all of the wonderful kids in the auditorium with their parents in their pajamas. It's a great concert, by the way. And they're all leaning over these little kids. They're trying their instruments out. Everybody's smiling. Everybody's having a great time. Then I noticed a woman off to the right-hand side of that Stillwater auditorium. And she was sitting all by herself in a wheelchair. So I thought, I better go over and ask her, what's up? And I said, which one is your grandchild? And she said, oh, I don't have any grandchildren here. And I think I looked kind of shocked. And she said, the doctor is giving me days to weeks to live. And I wanted to come tonight to hear the orchestra play the music of their future. I'm not making that up. That's what she said to me. And I don't know how we made it through the concert, how I made it through the concert last night, or that night. Because I was looking at all these kids in the orchestra, and then I would turn around and look at the kids in the auditorium, and thinking, that's really what we're doing. We're playing the music of our future together on stage. So Theda Redke was right. Think of it so often. The rose exceeds us. The rose exceeds all of us. That's what I wanted for you. That's what your parents wanted for you. And all of you who are parents now, that's what you want for your kids. Not in big dramatic ways, but in ways of listening to each other and allowing them to teach you and exceed what you can give them. That's also why we're here tonight for the Orchestra Fund, so that they can put this money in the the endowment and bring out that endowment money and offer the kids in the district wonderful, exciting opportunities on the way to adulthood. The notes that we play mattered. We wanted them in tune. We worked on that. But what mattered far more was our relationships with each other and the sense of humanity that we carried through the day and throughout our lives since you graduated from Stillwater. Thanks. I love you all.
We are mindful of the time, and we know we need to leave by 9 o'clock, clear out by 9. It's a beautiful night out there. Just a quick wrap up. I want to first introduce Heather Lockman from the St. Croix Valley Thank You Community Foundation with an announcement.
And I bet you are all sitting there going, thank goodness I'm not the one who takes the mic after that. Wow. I will keep this short. I'm Heather Loughlin. I am lucky to serve as the president and CEO of the St. Croix Valley Foundation, which is the community foundation that serves, yes, Stillwater and the entire valley, so 6 counties on both sides of our beautiful St. Croix River. We do a lot of things to support donors and to support the community. One of them is why I'm here tonight, which is we partner with nonprofits to steward endowed funds that will forever support the things that you all, that the communities you live in, care about. And so this fund, I actually learned a little bit about it today. This fund was established nearly 20 years ago as the Orchestra Legacy Fund. And the fund agreement, and I now understand this, it references the June 2004 orchestra weekend, which meant nothing to me until this evening. So wow, wow. So there are times when these endowed funds are established inspired by a person. And this is this case, right? Someone whose impact has been so significant that people want to honor that legacy with a fund that will live on forever. In this case, that will help these kids make the music of their future. However, with the name of the Orchestra Legacy Fund, someone who did not know that history, who was not here for the 2004 orchestra weekend, might not know the connection to this incredible and inspiring teacher. So I am delighted to share tonight that at the request of the board of the partnership plan, this endowed fund, this fund that will forever support orchestra in Stillwater Public Schools, will henceforth be named the Jim Hainlen Stillwater Orchestra. To this endowed fund, this forever fund that will every year provide dollars to help these amazing teachers in this district support and inspire kids who are trying to figure out how to do this orchestra thing. Thank you. Really proud and glad to be the endowment partner for the partnership plan and for this fund.